4 days ago, almost nobody outside the tennis world knew her name. By the end of the week, 3 of the sport's biggest names had been forced to learn it the hard way. Alex Eala arrived at the Berlin Open 2026 as a wild card, the lowest profile entry a draw can offer, and walked out having beaten a Queen's Club champion, a reigning Wimbledon champion, and World No. 2, and a former World No. 3, before finally losing in the semifinal. On the surface, that sounds like a story about a near miss. Look closer, and it is actually a story about a player whose ceiling just moved, days before the tournament that matters most. A wildcard entry is tennis's version of a polite invitation, rather than an earned seat at the table. Tournaments hand these spots out based on potential rather than ranking points. And the unwritten expectation is simple: gain experience, take a photo with the trophy presentation, perhaps steal one match if the stars align, and exit quietly before the tournament turns serious. That was the deal Eala walked into at Berlin. Low expectations, minimal pressure, and almost no attention from opposing coaching boxes. That last detail mattered more than it might seem. Nobody studies a wild card's patterns the night before a match. Nobody builds a specific game plan around an opponent sitting outside the spotlight of the draw. Eala entered as a question mark, just weeks before Wimbledon's 29 June start, on a grass surface where she still had relatively limited experience at this level. In theory, that lack of scouting should have made her early matches harder, not easier. Grass rewards players who already know exactly how the ball will behave off the surface. Instead, the absence of pressure seemed to free her up. She had nothing to defend, and everything to discover. Her first real test came against Donna Vekic, the reigning Queen's Club champion, and a proven grass court specialist who had lifted that trophy only weeks earlier. On paper, this was not supposed to be competitive. A veteran with big match composure against a rookie with limited grass court reps does not typically go the distance, let alone end early. For the first few games, the match unfolded exactly as predicted. Then something shifted. A clean backhand winner down the line. A serve landing precisely where it needed to. Points being won through patience instead of panic. By the time the scoreboard settled, it read something nobody had forecast. Eala had won, eliminating the defending Queen's Club champion in the very first round of the tournament. Almost nobody outside that stadium noticed yet. That was about to change very quickly. Her next opponent needed no introduction. Elena, Rybakina Wimbledon champion, World No. 2, and already a 2026 Australian Open winner, arrived in Berlin, preparing to defend her grass court crown. Rybakina's serve has ended the momentum of dozens of opponents across her career. And this matchup was supposed to be the reality check, the moment the underdog story collided with someone carrying too much firepower to lose to a wild card. Instead, Eala won in straight sets. 7-5, 6-4, a scoreline that does not happen against a player of Rybakina's caliber by accident. It marked Eala's 5th career win over a top 10 opponent, and it specifically avenged an earlier loss to Rybakina in Rome back in May, which gives the result added weight. This was not a fluke against an unfamiliar opponent, but a tactical correction against a player who had beaten her before. Eala's own reaction afterward captured the scale of the moment better than any statistic could. "I'm a little foggy right now. I think I'm still shaking. I was shaking on match point," she said. "After the win, I called my dad. I don't know. I said, 'Oh my God.' We were just screaming. My mom was there too. I'm really happy." That win is the moment the story stopped being a local Berlin headline and became a global one. Search interest in her name spiked overnight, and casual tennis followers who had never tracked her career before suddenly knew exactly who she was. If beating Rybakina wasn't proof enough, what came next forced a full reconsideration of what this run actually was. Elena Svitolina, a former World No. 3 and one of the most battle-tested competitors on tour, was waiting in the quarter-final. Svitolina has built a career on testing whether young opponents genuinely believe they belong at the top level, and she has ended more breakout runs than almost anyone active on the circuit today. For a stretch of the match, it looked like this run might finally hit its ceiling. Svitolina pushed back hard, narrowing a 5-2 deficit in the second set to 5-4, and forced Eala to fight for every single point down the stretch. This is exactly the kind of moment that separates a genuine contender from a player riding a hot streak, and it is worth noting that the pressure did not break Eala's composure, it sharpened it. She won the final 4 points of the match to close it out 6-3, 6-4 in 1 hour and 23 minutes. The result marked her 6th career win over a top 10 opponent, and sent her into her second career grass court semifinal. The numbers backed up the dominance just as clearly as the scoreline did. 19 winners against just 9 unforced errors. And 5 breaks of serve across the match, a near-perfect balance of aggression and control. Afterward, Eala spoke with visible respect for her opponent. Elina is a huge fighter, and I've seen it many times. I've been watching her since I was a kid, so to be able to compete with her today is such an honor, and I really admire her. She continued, "That was the most difficult moment of the match. It's not easy, especially when she's coming back and being more aggressive. Many factors come into play, but in the end, I was able to just conjure everything I had left in my brain, and it ended well. 3 matches, 3 legitimate top-tier opponents, 3 wins that had nothing to do with luck or a favorable draw. By the semi-final, Eala was no longer a name buried at the bottom of the bracket. She was the headline of the entire tournament. Waiting for her in the Final Four was the one player who already knew what it felt like to beat her decisively. Linda Noskova had beaten Eala convincingly earlier in 2026 at Indian Wells, dropping her to just 2 games in that encounter. Noskova walked into the Berlin semi-final clearly remembering that result and determined to prove it wasn't an outlier. From the very first game, the tone of this match was different from the 3 that preceded it. Noskova broke serve immediately, took the opening set 6-2, and never allowed the match to settle into any rhythm Eala could control. The second set stayed level until 4-4, when Noskova broke through for a 5-4 lead and served the match out cleanly. The numbers tell an honest story here, and it would be doing the result a disservice to dress it up as anything other than what it was, a clear professional win for Noskova. She needed just 69 minutes to close it out 6-2, 6-4, winning 81.8% of her first serve points, 27 of 33, compared to Eala's 52%, 13 of 25, and striking 8 aces along the way. Noskova was direct about her game plan afterward. "I wanted to change directions a lot. I wanted to go for it from the first serve, and then all the points after. That was the plan for today. It worked. And it worked decisively." This is a useful data point, not just a footnote. It shows that Eala still has a clear, identifiable weakness against players who serve big and dictate direction early. The same first serve numbers that powered her past Rybakina and Svitolina when she was the worked against her, once Noskova took control of that exact pattern. That is not a flaw to gloss over. It is the single clearest tactical lesson from the entire week, and almost certainly the first thing Eala's team will work on before Wimbledon. Even as the match slipped away, Eala kept competing, chasing down balls with little realistic chance of reaching them, searching for answers point after point until the very last game. The loss itself is not the interesting part of this story. What's interesting is how close the dream had become, visible and real for the first time all week, before it disappeared in the space of 1 set. Viewed only through the scoreboard, this is a story about a deep run that fell 1 match short. That framing misses most of what actually happened across the week. A wildcard entering with the lowest possible expectations defeated a reigning Queen's Club champion, a Wimbledon champion and World No. 2, and a former World No. 3 legitimate elite opponents, not spread across a season or a career, but inside a single tournament, on a surface she was supposedly still learning. For years, the conversation around Eala centered on potential, a promising talent, someone to keep an eye on eventually. 1 week in Berlin changed the terms of that conversation. Beating a Wimbledon champion in straight sets, then following it with a gritty win over a 6-time top 10 winner, is not the profile of a future prospect anymore. It is the profile of a player already operating at that level, in the present tense. That said, the Noskova loss is the necessary counterweight to that narrative, and it deserves to be treated as useful information rather than an inconvenient footnote. It shows precisely where the gap still exists. Against a player who serves with conviction and refuses to let the match breathe, Eala's own service numbers and return game did not hold up. That is fixable. It is also exactly the kind of opponent profile she is likely to face again at Wimbledon, which makes this loss arguably as valuable to her team as any of the 3 wins that arrived with enough time left to actually do something about it. Wimbledon begins on 29 June, just over a week after the Berlin semi-final, on the very surface that defined this entire run. Before this tournament, opponents facing Eala saw an inexperienced wildcard they could comfortably underestimate. That is no longer an accurate read. They now face a player who eliminated a defending grass court champion, beat a Wimbledon champion and World No. 2 in straight sets, and pushed a 6-time top 10 winner to her absolute limit, all in the same fortnight. on the same surface their next major will be contested on. Eala's recent form supports this shift in perception rather than contradicting it. She already holds the WTA 125 title from Birmingham, won earlier in June 2026. Just ahead of this Berlin run, meaning Berlin was not an isolated hot streak, but the continuation of a form curve that has been rising for weeks. Linda Noskova went on to face Jessica Pegula in the Berlin final, and that result is permanent and recorded in the history books. But a single match result does not measure everything a tournament produces. Berlin gave Eala something more durable than a trophy, documented match-tested proof that she can compete with and beat elite opponents under pressure, on a meaningful surface, in a tournament that mattered. A week ago, Alex Eala arrived in Berlin as a wild card nobody was specifically preparing for. She leaves having forced the entire tennis world to reconsider exactly what she is right now, flaws, and all with Wimbledon just days away, and every name left in that draw fully aware of exactly who she is.